I don't get to... Bam! Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of Going Over. I am your neighborhood-friendly coach, trainer, promoter, and 43-year-old still doing it, damn it, professional wrestler, Zack Primetime Reeb. I'm joined this way over here. Nick, I'm joined by my podcast partner, the 7-foot wrecking ball, Paul Isadora. And today I get to do this introduction, and I'm excited about it because when I think of professional wrestling, when I think of 11 years of learning underneath Schizo, learning underneath Oliver John, Roland Alexander, Gabe Ramirez, JJ Perez, 11 years, I finally got to be the head trainer of my own professional wrestling school. And I finally got to put out my own product without any help from anybody else. And I got to put out a lot of great stories, but a lot of hard work. And I would say probably the most successful student to ever come out of Primetime University. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, the man that just marginalized the gas money on the way to any trip we took, whether it was to Bakersfield or Las Vegas, my friend, and the man who still gives me my flowers to this day. Take it away, AJ Kirsch.
Wow, man. Thanks for that amazing intro. And yeah, I'm always happy to give you and PCW your flowers because that's where I started. And, you know, from day one of the most important lessons in wrestling is never forget where you came from and make sure you get your gas money.
Mm-hmm. Which you did.
I did, yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm pumped to be on here. And as soon as I saw you guys were cooking this thing up, first from afar, I was like, I want to talk. I want to get on at some point because I'm sure you two have no shortage of opinions about anything and everything pro wrestling related and beyond. I'm sure you agree on a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you disagree on a lot of stuff, and I'm sure we will agree and disagree on a lot as well. So if nothing else, it's going to make for a fascinating conversation.
Oh, yes,
absolutely.
Sir.
So, and I think it was one of those things like, you know, we were nervous about that first podcast coming out, right? Like, is anyone going to watch it? And, you know, then the ball started rolling. And I think, you know, I got a message from you pretty quick, you know, hey, listen to the podcast, loved it, or, you know, whatever the comment was. And I was just like, I don't know, to me, it's like, even though we're friends, I know you have so much on your plate. And it's humbling for me to say like, oh, this guy's got so much going on, but he took the time out to listen to something that two guys that he knows put out and took the time to reach out and say, hey man, I listened to it and I enjoyed it. So, you know, we've talked about this for months about putting this thing together, kind of how we wanted it to be formatted. You know, the main thing is we just want to help people who want to be in the pro wrestling business in some, you know, way, form, or fashion, get in there and kind of figure out how they need to go about doing it. But, you know, we were like, hey, we want to have guests, we want to do matches, like all these different things. So, of course, we had like a laundry list of people that we wanted to have as guests, you know, and you're on that list. But I was like, oh, it's probably going to be difficult to get some time with how busy you are. But I reached out to you. I said, hey, man, I'm awesome. You know, I appreciate the feedback on the podcast. I'm glad you took some time to watch it. We'd love to have you on. And you just immediately responded, yeah, that'd be great. And I wanted to know, like, hey, what do you think? Give us your feedback on what type of topics you thought would be, you know, a good thing to talk about, what young guys need to know. And then you shot me back a big, long list of stuff. And so we were like, okay, let's narrow this down to something that's not going to be, that we don't all have the same opinion on. So, so I think we came down to understanding that pro wrestling is a performance before it's a sport, or it's a showbiz before it's athletics. So, yeah, definitely we're going to have some differing opinions on those type of things. But we know what you've done in the Hood Slam realm, where you would say not the standard, ordinary pro wrestling, right? Outside the box is an understatement, I think. And so, I mean, get us started on this topic. What is your opinion when it comes to that? Like, I think a lot of people have, it's a sport, right? It has to look like a fight. It has to be super believable, make perfect sense. But how do you feel about that? Obviously, you have a little bit differing opinion, and ultimately, the whole goal is let's make money off of this.
Right.
So if you have a product that makes money, it's a successful thing, and that's quote unquote the right way to do things, right? Because that's the goal, make money. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the pro wrestling business, and business is better when everybody's making money. And so I think, and just to rewind a little bit, like, I appreciate you saying so, like, about tuning into the podcast, but you guys are not just two guys that put something out that I know. You guys are two guys that I've looked up to and respected ever since literally day one in the pro wrestling business. So it's, you guys are on a different level than everybody else. And I think this podcast is going to be extremely valuable for anybody looking to just get additional insight into pro wrestling. And that's the other thing about pro wrestling. You never stop learning. So this is going to be useful to just about everybody. But yes, pro wrestling is a business. None of us, we start out happy to do this for free, but nobody wants to do this for free. And nobody should have to do this for free. Ideally, everybody's getting paid. And I think it's still kind of criminal that pro wrestling pays as little as it does when you take into consideration how hard you have to work, the physical danger, the miles you have to put in. And I think it's starting to change. I think pro wrestling as a whole is enjoying a resurgence that hasn't been seen since the late 90s, early 2000s. The numbers are certainly stronger than ever, and it's easier to access wrestling than ever before. And I think with that accessibility comes an overdue need to kind of expand what pro wrestling can be as a storytelling medium. If it's making money, it's working. I remember Al Snow at one point, I think it was on Twitter or something, whatever it was. Al Snow was like, what was the best match from WrestleMania 3? And of course, everybody was like, Savage Steamboat. And he came back and said the best match from WrestleMania 3 was Hogan versus Andre, because that's what filled the Pontiac Silverdome. And the number's debatable, but whatever. They got a hell of a lot of people in the Pontiac Silverdome to see a 2-star at best match. They were there because they wanted to see Hogan and Andre. So that was, in Al Snow's mind, the best match of the night. Rest, now, it depends on what your definition of best is as well. But I think with the expansion of pro wrestling, especially recently, I think it's become more clear that pro wrestling is like any other genre of storytelling, movies, music, any type of art, and that there can be different types. There can be different genres of art. Movies, you've got sci-fi, you've got rom-coms, you've got horror, you've got dramas and comedies and everything in between. And I think pro wrestling is one of the simplest forms of storytelling in the world. It's one person trying to defeat another person. And it's also one of the most malleable forms of storytelling in the world, because you can have a wrestling classic like a Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit from Royal Rumble 2003. And if you haven't seen that match, you got to stop what you're doing after this podcast. Go out and check that match, because Kurt Angle said it's his favorite match that he's ever had. That alone should make it worth checking out. So you can have a scientific chain wrestling catch-as-catch-can classic, but you can also have the theatrics of like a Bray Wyatt or an Undertaker, like Undertaker, for the endless, respect that he has throughout the industry. Like, he was shooting lightning and like putting people in coffins, like, and this is still coming from an era where people were like, you got to treat it like a real sport. You do not have to treat pro wrestling like a real sport, because it's not. It's not a real sport. And the old guard was so conditioned to protect the business, protect the business, protect the business. Like, you guys came up, and to a certain extent I did too, when it was drilled into your head, you have to protect the business. You have to maintain the illusion that this is a fight, that this is genuine athletic competition, because the fear was, if the word got out that it wasn't that, nobody would come anymore. Everybody would just label it as that fake, phony wrestling, and they know what's going to happen ahead of time, and it's not real, so why should anybody care? And that was like, that's to this day, it's still the big criticism from people outside of pro wrestling. They're like, oh, you mean that fake wrestling stuff? Well, they know who's going to win ahead of time. Like, why would anybody care? The same reason why anybody would care about any work of fiction. Like, when you walk into Star Wars for the first time, you don't know how it's going to end, but you're going to go along with the idea that people can control things with their minds and have swords made out of light and have spaceships and light speed and all these ridiculous characters. The rules change when you step into a movie theater, and the rules change when you step into a pro wrestling show. And I think we're finally at a point where the rules can start to have a little bit more room to play. It doesn't just have to be wrestler A trying to defeat wrestler B. Your thoughts?
I I agree with you on that 100%. One of my favorite moments growing up as a kid was at the Royal Rumble, and it was Yokozuna versus the Undertaker. You speak of the Undertaker, and it was in that casket match, and it took like 12 guys, and they Taker fought them all off, and they finally put him in that casket. And I remember as a kid, I also cried over Brett and Razor at the Rumble too, because I thought Brett was going to lose, but they finally stuff him in that casket and they slam the lid shut, and they're taking that casket into the aisleway in front of the entrance, and the lights start flickering, and the Undertaker comes up on the screen and he says, "Thou shalt not rest in peace. The spirit of the Undertaker lives forever." And he rises up through, and to me, it was incredible, because it's like, how did they get that image of the Undertaker on the screen? And how is he rising up out of the screen? And I 100% agree with you on that, that performance. Me personally, and this is me personally, I have always been, because me and you had we've had a lot of great matchups, and a lot of them were at APW. We had your debut match, I still put in my top 10, man, from MWF down there in Chico.
Yep.
And that's just the way we did it down there when it was the PCW work farm and you were coming through. We did it with a lot of detail, man. And my belief is, when you take two guys that are similar athletes, you were a really good athlete. I take these two guys that are really good athletes, and they can do more. They can do more. We're out there, and we're able to make it more. So I think there are give and take times, because I've talked before about guys that come to shows and they say, we're gonna steal the fucking show tonight. And I always look at that person, whether I like them or not, and I go, dude, you're a fucking idiot, because it's not your job to steal this performance tonight. The promoter already has the match that's supposed to be the match of the night, and you're supposed to perform around it. And that's where the performance is, as you're talking about, which you're 100% right. That's where those performances are key, because you go, oh, I'm the pre-show match. I'm match number one. I'm not going to go to the fucking top rope. I'm not going to do this. There is that spot for comedy, and there is that spot for we're running a main story here. And tonight we've said AJ Kirsch versus Zack Reeb, just as an example, is going to be the very best match on this card. And that's what our job is tonight. We have been asked, whether I'm the promoter or not, we have told me and you are going out there, man, and we're going to give it to them tonight. Yeah. So in that sense, I feel, that has to be the most believable, realistic sporting competition on the night that we're going to put out there. And when you're speaking about Hood Slam, I remember talking to you back in the day about that. And because we would always come up with funny names too. We always came up with funny names on the road, and it's very creative. I remember one time she could ask me to be MP motherfucking T, like a Rob Van Dam. Nothing ever came of it, but for me, I like that. I like the fact that he was going to use my character in a character related to a guy that had influenced me, especially with a finishing move I've done. So I agree with you, man. Denzel Washington was not a badass cop in Training Day, but if the acting is good, I can suspend my belief. And real quick before I throw it to you, Paul. So Skits came back and he's in the show this last show, and I hadn't seen a real heel, a real villainous performance until this guy was out there. You were there, Paul. And he's inciting a riot, and fans are trying to jump the guardrail, and they're throwing shit at him, and they're fighting, and we're having to tackle fans and get him out of the building. And people who know who he is in the performance, teenage girls whose father was in the performance, they are literally pissed and have completely forgotten. They have forgotten that they know this guy, and they know that their father knows this guy, and they're just so pissed off about this guy's performance and what he's saying and what he's doing that they completely made fools of themselves and got lost in the moment, tears running down their eyes from anger. And I sat back and watched this and I said, holy shit, he is the mastermind, because I've seen so many guys come out here and pretend to be the standard bad guy. And what is the bad guy? The bad guy's not the guy. If they're booing you, like boo, and they're loving to hate you, you're not a real heel, man. You are a baby face that is kind of like I'm a rebel. You know what I mean? I'm a rebellious, stone cold Steve Austin babyface. But a real heel, when that music hits and they come to the curtain, fans are genuinely pissed off that this guy's even getting an opportunity to walk out in front of them.
Yeah.
Mr.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I definitely, this is, like I said in the last couple episodes, it's kind of like, this is a learning experience for me as well, even though 20 plus years in, right? I've always looked at it as, when I'm critiquing matches, when I'm watching stuff like that, I've always been like, that didn't look realistic. For a long time, I've always thought like, a woman versus a man, a great story to tell, right, would be like, you are almost like you're not taking her seriously, right? It's like, I understand that you want to be in a wrestling match, but this is not the right spot for you to be in, right? Because there is no way in the world that people are going to believe that a female wrestler could beat me up, right? So trying to put that story over that we're going to, I'm going to avoid the conflict. I'm going to try to talk this person out of having a fight with me. And then eventually you're going to build to the end of this where maybe it's just one punch in the face. That's the end of the story, because you punch her and you knock her out, because that's what I feel like is realistic and that's what should happen. But as you guys are talking, it's so funny, because then it brings me back to these things that I'm like, the Undertaker stuff, the believability stuff, that the way that we explain things about, hey, you're at a movie, you don't think this guy really is, this character, right? When you see him on the street, that's not the character that you're going to talk to. You're going to say, hey, Mr. Schwarzenegger, good to see you, man. Love your stuff, right? But in the movies, it's the character, and you buy in and you get lost, and that's kind of what we're anticipating people doing within the wrestling business, right? You're going, hey, it is a staged event. We're trying to have you suspend your disbelief for those 2 hours or whatever, however long the event is. But I definitely fall victim of the believability portion of it. I'm like, hey, that wouldn't happen in real life. So, I mean, I think
I think there's
we're
something.
talking.
I think there's something to be said for that too. Like,
Right.
even if you're watching a completely absurd movie, you still want the acting to be good. You want the soundtrack to be good. So even if the genre of wrestling you're watching is not necessarily taking it as seriously as some other promotions, the work still needs to be good. A good punch still needs to look like a good punch, and a good kick still needs to look like a good kick. Like, the point, I feel like, going back to something you said, Zach, where it's like the point is with just that sheer heat that Schizo is getting, like, from people who know what this is. They know the show, like, they're aware of what they're watching. But like, the phrase that I keep going back to when I'm describing pro wrestling to people who may not be super familiar with it is, the point is not to convince fans that it's real. The point is to make them forget that it's not. You can just make them forget that it's not real. You can do pretty much anything, but the execution still has to be there. You can't have a phony ass punch and have somebody sell it and expect, I don't care what type of wrestling you like, if somebody throws a punch and it misses by a mile, then it's like, what am I watching here? Like, the illusion, regardless of whether the illusion is like actual combat or something silly and dramatic and over the top, is ruined at that point. And that's why people are paying their money. They're paying their money to be like, tell me a story, and because I'm paying for it, I'm expecting it to be told well. And so regardless of if you want to do some type of, hood slam or like DDT Pro from Japan, which is a notoriously like out there wrestling promotion, or if you want to do like Ring of Honor or AEW or like, true like wrestling nerd wrestling, or WWE, where it's more dramatic than anything else, your work has to be on point. It has to be on point. And that also means taking care of yourself and working out and eating right and doing what you need to do, so that whatever the story is that you're telling, you're not giving anybody a reason not to believe it. Because if you do, you've lost them.
I'm going to jump in real quick, man. I almost, as I'm talking, I'm feeling like super hypocritical because as I'm listening to your voice, AJ, I'm remembering, it's bringing up the memory of me versus Brutal Rob Hands. And we tell characters this all the time, right? It's like, if you're that character, then it's like, hey, I'm a big fat guy, but I'm going to pretend my character is the Hallow Shall character,
right?
Looking at themselves in the mirror and seeing Ravishing Rick Rude, right? If you don't do that, if it's tongue in cheek, you hear Jericho say it all the time, right? I'm not really a wizard, but I'm going to act as if I am actually thinking I am a wizard 100%. And I think about that match and going, so you can visually see these people. They are not the same size, but they are portraying two characters that are the same size.
Right. So for people who don't know, Brutal Rob Hands is like 5'6", 5'7", and like 140 pounds or something. But the gimmick is he thinks he's Psycho Sid. Like, literally, he's 6'10", 313 pounds, and people have a hard time moving him because as soon as they get a hold of him, they realize, oh my God, he's 6'10" and 313 pounds. And so for a legit 7-footer like Paul going up against a legit 5'7" dude, like, but it was a battle of the giants, and Brutal Rob Hands is so good at working as a big man. It helps when you have live commentary so you can sell it even more. But to your point, Paul, you put him over like $1 million, and it was one of the most fun matches I've ever called because you have this legit giant against this little short stack, but it's like the battle of these behemoths. It was great. And I do also want to point out the time, Big Paul, that you were at Hood Slam against the late great Virgil Flynn III as the Jolly Green Giant.
Right, we teamed together.
Oh, you teamed together. That's right. Virgil did the 450
right
off your shoulders. That's
and
right.
What's crazy is, obviously, you're a big proponent and longtime commentator of Hood Slam, which got this reputation among the boys, like these guys are getting drunk, they're getting stoned, they're going out there and they're doing dangerous wrestling, right? That was the original thing, right? I remember everybody saying, like, what the hell are they doing? This is never gonna last. How stupid of these guys. Wrestling's already this dangerous, and they're making it more dangerous. And then it grew into this thing that I just remember Adam and I at one point going, dude, we got to get on this show because we have to experience it. We have to see what this is like. And then they pitched like, hey, we want you to be Jolly Green Giant. And I'm like, this is a challenge, right? I'm going to come out and I am going to go 100% and I'm going to dive in and do this character. And I'm going to portray it exactly the way that I think I see it on the can, the Jolly Green Giant can, right? It's going to be friendly. I'm going to be forcing people to eat vegetables.
Yes.
It's just, and like I said, as I'm talking, this is like, okay, yeah. I've already bought into it's a performance, even though mentally right now, I think this is a sport. We have to make it look as realistic and believable as possible with what we see versus what we're, portraying for people to see,
right.
Now that, we're trying to put it together.
You did both because your work is so solid. Your work is on point. But when you committed to the Jolly Green Giant character, as soon as you walked through the curtain, you didn't have to do a damn thing. But you knew exactly what to do to make the most of that character. And it's just fun. Like, fun does not have to be necessarily super serious, but it's fun. And it's to this day after, I was at Hood Slam for like 12 years or something. It's still one of the favorite matches that I've ever seen, and was able to call was you and Virgil. And I forgot that you were together, but yeah, it was you two together. And he ends up doing the 450 off your shoulders, which is just, God bless Virgil for the third. But yeah, you both crushed it that night.
So you guys were saying, and a good example is the People's Elbow. Another good example is the Worm. Another good example is Rikishi doing the stink face. Now, all three of these guys are very good workers that ended up doing very these are not believable things they're doing, but they have gotten over with the audience. It was like, I remember you said something a minute ago too that I wanted to touch on, because we always talk about the difference between doing, whether it's live or it's taped, pre-recorded commentary that goes on the thing, and then doing the live commentary over the action. And a lot of times I feel that the live commentary over the action takes away from the interaction that somebody works with the crowd. And I want to touch on that for a second, but I also wanted to say that when we're talking about having fun out there and we're talking about telling these stories, I think people forget that it is our job to go out there and it is our job to listen. That's what they mean by have an ear for the audience. So if we're wrestling in 20 different towns and we're listening to that audience in 20 different towns, which the psychology is whatever formula or plot you are in the match, whatever spot you're in this contest leading forward, you're listening to the crowd, because the crowd is going to dictate when you rise up, when you come down, when you do all that. I just thought it was interesting. I was talking to someone the other day and I said, if you're in 20 different towns and you listen to that crowd, you can create 20 different pieces of art in 20 different towns, even if you're wrestling the same guy, because that audience is never going to be the same in any of those towns, which make this business. That's what I love about this business and I'm so passionate about, is because I still learn to this day. I learned some stuff just now when I was talking to you, because I'm a proponent of making it look real, but also I get in trouble so many times with my coach and other people because I just want to do stupid shit all the time. I just came up with a jobber character with no music, and I was trying to pitch it to Paul at the last show, and I told it I hadn't seen Adam in a while, and I said, hey, imagine here comes the rock legend scum Adam Thornstowe, music, and then the announcer goes, and currently in the ring, and it's just regular white guy in a singlet, and the announcer goes, and his opponent currently in the ring, Bill Cosby. And I'm like, yeah, he doesn't play a gimmick. He doesn't have a sweater. His name isn't Bill Cosby. He's just a normal white wrestler with the name of Bill Cosby. I'm like, could you imagine over time what the fans would have fun with this, and the fans would create that. But that real quick is what I wanted to talk to you about, because you just said it. You said it about the Jolly Green Giant over here to my left, my podcast partner, the big old Jolly Green Giant over here on the front of the can. You said you didn't have to do nothing. And you said, I was able to get this over on commentary. And I was going to ask you that question, which I still believe if you see a lot of shows where they're doing live commentary, they are shitting all over the wrestling. But tell me, as the man, the host of this, and by the way, I would say I would love to have gone to Hood Slam to know what it's like to drink and do and smoke weed and go out there and wrestle. But I made a career out of doing that until I got my life together. So I've been Hood slamming it out there in the ring for a long time. But yeah, AJ, just touch real quick on the difference between when you're doing the live commentary and you're getting this story over. Are you actually feeding your live commentary off the reaction of the live audience?
Yes. So, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's oftentimes a polarizing topic. But I did want to touch on something else you said. When you're in a different town every night, you do have the chance to create 20 different pieces of art, but you also don't know how every crowd is going to react. They may not react to your same stuff every night. So I actually compare pro wrestlers a lot to comedians, because comedians kind of know their bits that are going to work most of the time. They're famous bits that everybody knows and probably people are waiting for. But if you've got your move set or your spot set and it's not getting over as a comedian, you better know how to do some crowd work or pivot or improvise real quick. Otherwise, you're going to lose that audience. And pro wrestling is exactly the same. You might have some fans in the audience that are really waiting for you to hit that signature move or hit your catchphrase or whatever it is. But if they don't know you, or if they're not responding to your stuff like you're used to your home crowd responding, you better have an ear for an audience and find out what they do respond to. Otherwise, they're not going to want to come back and see you again. So I'm really glad you brought that up. But as far as live commentary goes, Paul didn't need live commentary when he walked out, decked out in green and everything. Everyone look at him and you're like, he's the Jolly Green Giant. Of course he is. But what I think is super important about live commentary, and you're right, it is absolutely atrocious most places. And I'll get into that in a second. I think the value in live commentary is that it allows me or the commentator to guide the audience's attention to what's important about the match. So like if there is an injury that a wrestler is getting over and one of the wrestlers starts picking apart their knee, when there's a lull in the action, 5 or 10 seconds, I get to put over to the audience why the wrestler is doing that and why it's important to pay attention to that for the remainder of the match. If there's something funny that happens and I laugh along with it, like the crowd is more inclined to laugh along with me because I'm watching it as a fan as well. Like I'm kind of guiding the audience's attention, but I'm also keeping the energy up in the room because we've all had moments in the ring when it's like a little too quiet. When it's, and like even if I can tell the guys in the ring or girls for that matter are about to like swap some information or go over a spot, I can start chatting real quick to take some attention away from that. If there's a big comeback happening, I get to raise my tone and raise my excitement because this is a part where we want the crowd to come alive as well. So if their energy isn't quite on par with the match, I might have my energy like one step beyond where the crowd is so they can kind of meet me there. So I feel like there are a ton of benefits to the live, and it just also allows a more rapport with the audience. It allows more of an ongoing connection. Like we're all kind of experiencing this together and less more like they're outside the barricade watching and we're inside the barricade performing. It's another chance to form a relationship with the audience over the course of the entire night. And I don't know another part of a pro wrestling show that allows a promotion to do that as intimately as when they have live commentary. Does all that make sense?
It does. You said it though, and we're talking about it, which makes sense. It's the performance that you're giving. So the live commentary is getting over because we have a good performer doing the live commentary, and he knows what he does. And that's one thing that I've always said about you. You said it earlier too, and I want to get Paul's take on this. You said it earlier when you were talking about the performance, and this was earlier in the show. You said, and we always go back to the excellence of execution, Bret the Hitman Hart. And can you execute? Because I always tell people there's two things, and we're not even talking about the fucking promo or being able to talk. You're either, you can do both well, but you're either A, able to work that audience and understand what's going on there, and maybe you don't execute as well. Or B, and I can take a Chris Benoit, a Dean Malenko, you are incredible at the execution and believability of this business, but in the same sense, you don't work the audience as much. And I always feel like if you can take someone, and they don't have to be the best wrestler on the mat, but in their performance, if you can take a performer, even if they're a comedic performer, and they can execute, aka Paul, Adrian Adonis, if you can execute that performance, because Adrian Adonis, he was flamboyant and all over the place, but after he was done being flamboyant, he would get mean and he would just destroy his opponent in a vicious way, and then he would go back to being flamboyant. And I think what we're missing today, and I got to quit saying I think. I heard you say it too, AJ. Paul says it all the time. It drives me absolutely fucking crazy when I say it, but what's missing from today's performance is these guys, these girls have to realize it's okay to joke around. It's okay to be funny. But when we're in control or we can be funny, but when we go back to the action, we really are kicking somebody's ass in this performance aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. So obviously you have to have that good meshing of those things. And I thought, AJ, you said something that kind of triggered me a little bit, right? So you talk about maybe you're talking about a body part that you see gets injured, and you think that's a great thing to talk about on live commentary. But what happens if that guy or girl forgets that their knee was just getting worked for the past 4 minutes, and they start their comeback or whatever, and they're not doing that, and then now you've talked about it already, and now that makes the wrestler look stupid, because now it's like, hey, you're talking about what realistically should be happening because you just got your knee worked on for a couple minutes and you should be selling that, but now you just completely Superman up, and it's my turn to be on offense and do that. So I can also see the benefit of you being vocal like that to help guys go, hey, I should be selling this knee, because AJ put it over on commentary to this entire audience,
right,
that my knee is hurting. So
they can hear me too. Like they can the wrestlers can hear me too. It's like,
right.
And I'll oftentimes, I'll call it like I see it. Like I'm actually commentating on what I'm seeing. And so if I say something like, look at the agony strewn across MPT's face, you'll hear that and lean into that. Like you'll hear me point that out and lean into that even more. And so I think having live commentary actually kind of helps the wrestlers focus on the story. They're remind them of the story they're trying to tell as well. So it's like if there's a hot comeback coming and all of a sudden somebody's not selling their knee, I can say something like, that adrenaline is doing wonders, but not in a shady way, but do it in a way that kind of like reminds the wrestler with the subtext, hey, don't forget to sell your knee. Like he's been working on that the whole time. So, I can also kind of be the wrestlers' eyes and ears in a way that they can't be. I can pay attention to the audience a little bit more astutely than they might be able to while they're kind of thinking about what's coming next or setting up for the next spot or whatever the case may be. Doesn't mean every wrestler should not be amazing at doing everything at once, but I think it helps having another set of eyes and ears out there. And I'm not the story. Like I'm not out there claiming to be the story. I think of myself as the narrator or like the soundtrack that plays while the movie's unfolding in front of you.
Yeah, you're
absolutely. I think another thing is, I don't know how many times you guys have been at a show or been talking to someone who's watches wrestling on TV, but they go to a live show. My wife is like this. Hey, what happened to the commentators? Like, why aren't they talking about the wrestling right now? Because you're so attuned to it, because all you've ever done is watch it on TV. Then you go to a live event and you're like, what was that move called? Like, because normally the announcer will tell me what it is,
right?
So I can also see that being a huge benefit for, helping those people that are novice fans of live performances to kind of feel a little bit more comfortable, because they know, like, okay, so this guy's kind of helping tell the story just like they do on TV. So I can see that being a big benefit too. So
that was kind of
sorry, man, I cut you off.
Go for it, bro.
Oh, this is a two-parter, guys, because this is my curiosity, and I have both of you guys. So I know you and Big Paul, just like myself. I know you and Big Paul have worked plenty of times in other promotions and plenty of times in Pro Championship Wrestling, which nobody went up for that back body drop, that PCW trained back body drop with the Jeff Hardy eyes tuck at the last second. Why not? Let's take it 6 inches, a 6-inch bump instead of a 9-foot bump. I love it. You went up well for that choke slam. But all that aside, I was talking to Paul, and I didn't realize that when you went to Tough Enough, Paul was telling me he was also there for that as well. And I know I don't know shit about this except for what I talked to Paul just briefly, because we talk to each other every day on the phone. And I know the people out there in podcast land have no idea about this. So I kind of want to turn this right now over to you two. And no idea that Paul was down there, and I had no idea about any of this. So catch me up to fucking speed, guys. I need to know.
Right. So we talked about this. Like, AJ had his podcast about Tough Enough specifically. So I was lucky enough to be one of the guests on there, even though I wasn't on the show. Right. But I thought it was a really cool experience. Right. We went down there. It was really my first experience with like an acting type setting. And I know, AJ, you've done a ton of that now, and you've even helped me get some line up some stuff where I've got some commercial work as well. But that was my first opportunity, when it was like cameras on all the time, and like just you can't talk to somebody else. Like, you're they made it seem like like the cameras are on. They're gonna know if I talk to AJ sometime during this whole scenario, they're gonna call us on it and things like that. So it was very like, we're secluded. I didn't know all these other guys. I remember seeing Eric Watts at one point, and I thought, dude, this dude's a badass. Like, he had the piercing in the eyebrow, never smiled at me or anything like that. And looking back at it, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this guy saw another big guy as competition, so he's like, I'm not smiling at this motherfucker. This dude might get my spot. And I thought the same thing about him. I was like, this is another big dude. And so
you were on Tough Enough? That's what
it was. There was 20. It was 26 spots. So we were all in that last 26 spots, and then they cut it in half. So I got sent home, and AJ stayed. But I thought it was funny, because I almost thought, like, AJ made a comment to me at one point and said, at least one of us is going to make it. And I was like, oh man, such a nice thing for you to say, AJ, because you think I'm going to make it. And then this motherfucker, and then I see he makes it instead. And I was like, oh, maybe he already knew something. Yeah, and he was trying to, like, let me down easy. At least one of us made it. Right?
It was a weird experience, though, because we did have that gag order. Like, they didn't want anybody saying a word to anybody. We were being constantly supervised to make sure that wasn't the case, because they wanted the final, I think it was 14 who made it into the house, onto the show, to meet and like get to know each other for the first time when the cameras were on them. So we were in this hotel in LA for a couple days on end, just like interview after interview. They would actually bring us out only to like work out at this nearby 24-hour fitness, and they would take us in shifts, like 3 or 4 at a time. We had to work out in different areas in the gym so that we weren't talking to each other. We couldn't tell anybody why we were there. So it was a really weird experience. Another fun fact, I'm forgetting his shoot name, but Xavier Woods was also among the final 28 who were flown to LA. And then, like Paul said, 14 were sent home, and the 14 that stayed went right into shooting. So it was like they told everybody to pack as if we were going to be down there for 8 weeks. And so half of us stayed, half of us went. And Paul, I don't remember how far into casting that I made that comment. If I had to guess, and again, I don't remember.
I felt like it was the day they came up and told me that I had to go home. Yeah. So I felt like it was deep in, like we had already been there for a couple days. Because I remember we, just like you said, secluded and separated and all this. I remember going to the doctor to get a physical and blood work and all that stuff.
Oh yeah,
with a couple people, and then I remember going to the gym with a couple people, tanning with a couple people, grocery store. Right, we went to Whole Foods or whatever. Yeah. And people were getting like steaks grilled there. And I'm like, oh, that's a thing?
Yeah.
You can have them prepare your steak at the store. Yeah. You know? So it was just like, it was just crazy. But it was just
they like took us to Whole Foods, and they took us to the tanning salon, but we were supervised the entire time. Right. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the type of thing where like when I found out that I was on the show, somebody knocked on my hotel door, and when I opened it, there was like a camera, big light, somebody with a boom mic, and like wanting to get our reactions. It's like that footage is out there somewhere. And so I don't know that they would have let us have any contact with anybody after that point, because I think next day we went down to SmackDown in San Diego to shoot. So I would like to think when I said at least one of us is going to make it, it was just trying to be optimistic and just being like, between you and me, like, I don't know.
Right.
But
there's talent so here, and someone's going to do this. Yeah. We're going to represent NorCal somehow.
Exactly.
Right.
But it was like so nice to see a familiar face, because I wasn't green, but like I was still so far from finding my confidence as a performer and as a wrestler. And I remember this so vividly. I was like filling out a form or something, and there were dozens of them. They were like psychiatric evaluations and blood work and just so much stuff. And I remember somebody catching my eye, and I looked up, and then I like looked all the way up here, and you walked up to the table, and you just like gave me one of the frown smiles. You were just kind of like, and like a fist bump. And just that little gesture I so appreciated, because it was like, oh my God, a familiar face. Like, and it would have been so much fun to be on the show together. It would have been such a blast if you were there too. It would have had this little NorCal alliance until inevitably, I'm sure, we would have been put up against each other. But just that little fist bump, I'll never forget that fist bump. But it felt like it was a little bit less intimidating when I saw you there.
Of course. And I remember there being two things on my mind after I got cut. I was like, if any of these guys are not in shape, if any of these guys blow up in the ring, because I was fucking ready, man. I was, I was ready for this thing, man. And if anybody quits, if they give up their spot, I'm going to be fucking irate.
Yeah.
And both of those things happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Eric Watts blew up in the ring, running the ropes.
Yep.
And I'm like, that would never, ever, ever happen to me. Right.
Right.
And then that one girl was like, I just don't think it's for me. And we just went home. Right.
Yeah.
And
I mean, and she was not from the wrestling background. A handful of folks were not from the wrestling background. And so in a sense, I think for some, it was almost an advantage, because they weren't tied into a lot of pro wrestling's bad habits. And I think some of the things that pro wrestling gets in its own way a lot of the time. And I think, kind of circling back to the original point, by stepping out of the box of having to insist that it's presented as a sport and that every match has to be presented in a similar way, I think pro wrestling has the opportunity, and has been recently, reaching far more people and showing people that you don't have to just be into pro wrestling to be a pro wrestling fan.
Mm. One thing I wanted to say too, when we're talking about the performance, and I'm glad you guys talked about that, because when he said that to me, I said, man, I talked to AJ for years, man. I never knew you guys. I didn't know this motherfucker was in Tough Enough, man. When he told me that, I'm like, are you kidding me? And then he said, I talked to AJ. He's going to be on the show. I'm like, oh, we got to bring this up. I got to hear this story.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the performance, man, and I pride myself on being a very good storyteller. I pride myself on running a great program and being able to bring people in the building. Things I do are specifically built into the camera when I perform to make build-up videos. And I pride myself on my storytelling, my performance. And I know it's a performance, and I love the performance because my dad sat me down with the classic story. I watched Hulk Hogan, and I love Hulk Hogan, man. Great story. You brought up WrestleMania 3. But as a performer, my God, AJ, we're at the 9-minute mark here, and we're going to have you on this show plenty of times. But one thing I don't want everything, because we got to see you many more times on this program.
Gotta leave them wanting more.
Yeah, we have to leave them wanting more. You of all people know that, but I have to know, because damn it, the one thing that I am so proud of you, and this is you. This is AJ Kirsch, is this guy. When you're on that show, and it's a two-parter, and it deals with the same guy. When you're on that show and Stone Cold Steve Austin calls you tumbleweed, he says, man, you're a nice guy. You'd probably mow my lawn, pick up my dog shit, all that stuff. One of my favorite lines, by the way. But you cut this promo on Hugh Morris, and I go back and watch this promo because Trish Stratus, The Rock, maybe Booker T, I think, too. And Hugh Morris like, God damn, that was good. And The Rock's like, that's good. So you come into your own on this show, and you really stand out with you're a performer, man. You are a performer. And speaking of this as a performance, so you come into this as a performer, and you really impress The Rock on that. And that's what I'm going to put up on this thing, is you with that Rock the Promo Championship, man. You once again get with The Rock, man. Sorry, the great one. And you go on his own platform, and you out promo everybody in this tournament, and The Rock gives you this championship. I just tell us a little bit, and tell the people, working with Stone Cold, working with The Rock, that promo, you got 7 minutes to jam this in. That promo with Hugh, tell us about that promo with Hugh Morris in the performance aspect, and what it was like briefly in that Rock the Promo challenge, and how you felt when you were the winner.
For sure. That was probably the most pivotal moment in my career, because on Tough Enough, up to that point, it was the 8th of 10 episodes, and like, I'd had some rough days up to that point. I was like stressed. I wasn't sleeping. I was tired. I was banged up. And I kind of knew that my time was limited there. And I'd been very like honest about this. Had Martin not hurt his ankle, because Martin was the front runner up to that point. Had he not hurt his ankle, I would have been out of there before he would have been out of there. But he had to quit, because he was physically unable to continue. So that like bought me some time. I was in the ring when Christina got hurt, and like that just looked awful, and I felt awful about it. So I knew I had some rough days, and like from the beginning though, and it was really like going back to this promo that I cut on Jody Christopherson at Fog City Wrestling with his dad, rest in peace, Chris Christopherson. He was in the house at the time, and I cut this promo on him, and that was the first time where I was like, I think I can cut a good promo. I think I'm a good promo. Like that that gave me the confidence to get confident when I have a mic in my hand. And so on Tough Enough, the whole time I was just kind of like, when's this promo skills challenge coming? They didn't tell me it was coming. I just knew. I knew it was coming at some point. To your point earlier, you do not have to be the best worker in the world, but if you can captivate an audience, and in wrestling, if you can cut a good promo, you can draw for generations. And so I was like, just let me get on the mic. I don't know what the context is going to be. Just let me get on that mic. And so when I heard the skills challenge was coming up, it was a promo skills challenge. The day of, they just said, okay, you guys got to be down at like 9 a.m. Okay, we got to push it back a few hours. Be down at 11. Be down at noon. They kept pushing it back, and I didn't know why, but it was later told to me that it was because they were going to surprise us by having The Rock there. So he was just shooting movies, and, you know, it was just obviously he's one of the busiest guys in the world, was back then. So we didn't know he was going to be there. Tough Enough didn't know he was going to be there. It just so happened to work out that way. And so I already had an idea that we originally had 2 minutes, and then we were told that our time was getting cut to like 90 seconds. And part of that was to like mess with our heads and be like, okay, adjust. You know what I mean? Your time got cut. You got to adjust. And I kind of had an idea of what I was going to say, and all of it was true and from the heart and authentic, still very performative because it was through the storytelling medium of a pro wrestling promo. But like, that was arguably the most pivotal moment in my career because it gave me exponential confidence, like beyond what I had before in cutting a promo. Obviously I made an impression on The Rock and Steve Austin and Trish Stratus and Bill DeMott, which felt amazing. It was not enough to save me from being eliminated that day. And I think it was the right choice. I was not ready. The further I get from Tough Enough, the more I realize how not ready I was. And that is not a knock on you, Primetime, or PCW. I just had not yet found my voice as a performer. That, in fact, was the first time I had found my voice as a performer in pro wrestling. And I really kind of understood where my contributions are most valuable to pro wrestling. It's not in the ring. I was always a good wrestler. I could wrestle anybody, but I am pretty untouchable on the mic. And that was the first moment where I really knew it. And coming off of Tough Enough, I was like, well, if I don't have a future in WWE as a wrestler, I want to start developing commentary skills and ring announcing skills and hosting skills. And Hood Slam was the first place I had a chance to do that. And after that, I was like off to the races. Obviously, I'm still doing it to this very day. And not just in wrestling, but in virtually everything else as well. And so when I learned that The Rock was starting a YouTube channel, Rock the Promo was the vehicle that he was using to launch it. It was a pro wrestling style trash talk tournament that was evaluated by pro wrestling legends. So like my rounds were evaluated by, in this order, let me see if I can get it right. It was Kurt Angle, Christian, Cody Rhodes, Christian, Cody Rhodes, Mick Foley, Edge, and then the finals was in front of The Rock himself, and then he made the final call. So I had to get approval from all of those legends. They saw my promos, they saw who I was facing, and they were like, who has the better promo? So I got seals of approval from Kurt Angle, Christian, Cody Rhodes, Mick Foley, Edge, and then Dwayne Johnson himself for the second time, winning Rock the Promo. And if anybody wants to check it out, it's still on YouTube. You can just YouTube Rock the Promo, and I did it as Broseph Joe Brody, which I feel like is just such a fun character, and like everybody knows some obnoxious a-hole like Broseph, and so it's an easy character to kind of relate to. So that's how I really found my calling in wrestling. I didn't realize it when I joined the PCW work farm, but my most valuable contributions, and I've since learned where I have the most fun in wrestling, is behind a mic. And that's as a host, ring announcer, commentator, manager. Doesn't matter what it is. If you put me on a mic, I will absolutely add far more value to your show. And so to have kind of like found where I belong in pro wrestling is an indescribably good feeling.
Love it.
All right, man, close us down. 10 seconds.
Go home, bro. Go home.
10 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, we're going to put some links up. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk to oh my God, we hit the 1 hour mark. I'm going to go 2 extra bonus minutes here, ladies and gentlemen. No, AJ, we appreciate you. I'm going to talk to my production team. I think that people watching this platform need to see that promo with Bill DeMott, Hugh Morris, and I don't know if we can show that legally, but if we can't, maybe we can show that final promo. I remember watching that you did on Rock the Promo Challenge. I mean, I am just I'm so proud of you, man. And it has nothing to do with professional wrestling at all, brother. It has to do with you are a stand-up fucking human being, man. You've always been so kind to everybody around you. You always give positive feedback. You have a different way of just making people feel better about themselves. And there's this fucking good spirit in your body, man. And I'm just so proud that you did find your voice and you did find your way, because I always follow AJ Kirsch on Facebook and Instagram just to see what you got going on next, man. Are you going to be at the Super Bowl doing something? Are you going to be in a commercial, man? It's like this dude pops up. You pop up everywhere and anywhere. And to me, that I don't run around and brag about it or anything like that, because I'm just happy that somebody that I got to meet in this wrestling business and help a little bit along the way to realize their dream, just to watch you successful, man, is the most. And Big Paul, you got anything left? Because we got to cut this guy off so we don't give everything away, because we need him back on.
Right, exactly. Go in. Yeah. No, I mean, the one last thing I have to say is that it's not by chance that all this stuff happened. It was like, and I've told you this on numerous occasions, AJ, like, you are the guy that grinds and works hard and deserves everything that you've gotten. It's not by accident. This is you do this intentionally by how much work you put into what you're doing and how driven you are. I don't know how many times I've seen you up at 3 a.m. to get to a casting call, not only to get back to town for another event that you've got going on. You pack your schedule so tightly and make every obligation that you can. Weddings, all these different things, man. And it's just like you just go over the top to make yourself the best version of yourself you can. So kudos to you for doing that stuff, man.
Well,
I'm exhausted watching him.
Yeah, I can't thank you guys enough, but also none of this would have happened unless I made the decision to pursue my dream of becoming a pro wrestler, and it started at the PCW work farm. So, and I couldn't have done it without the guidance of my opponents as well, who had more experience than I did, like you, Big Paul. So I just am endlessly grateful to both of you guys. None of this would have happened without you.
Awesome.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, that's AJ Kirsch. That's the 7-foot Paul Isadora. I'm Zack Primetime Reeb, and I'm going to let everybody know a little something. Today, I would say, all three of us, we're going over. And you listening to the podcast, you're going over, because you're the ones that really won from getting all this informative information. Thanks again, AJ. And hey, Paul, had another good one, man.
All right, brother. See you guys.